Hey, folks, this podcast is brought to you by Parlay Play Fantasy Sports. Use my referral code RotoBrady. Get that sweet, sweet deposit bonus. They've got paid contests coming to states and territories and countries probably near you. They're giving out boosts and bonuses. They're slashing lines all day long. Hop in those player prop DFS contests. It's a very interesting and fun platform at that place. And what is up, everybody? This is Brady Grove bringing you another interlude episode of the Tap That MMA podcast. Check out all the recent interlude episodes. We got a ton more on the calendar coming up. Follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady, recording this the day after UFC Mexico. Follow me on Instagram at RotoBrady MMA. Follow the podcast at Tab That MMA Podcast on YouTube and Spotify, and it's now available on Apple Podcasts and Amazon Music. And with me today,
all three judges, Lisa, Doran, Harlan, Bolton, and Johnny Stewart, see this battle at 30-27. Your winner by unanimous decision out of the blue corner, Cheyenne Paul.
folks, you heard it a little bit there. This is a 4-1 professional women's featherweight fighter coming out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. 4-1 as a pro. And has, there's a couple interesting things we're going to get into here. Give it up for Cheyenne Bat Queen Hall. Cheyenne, thank you so much for being here. How's it going?
Doing good. Thanks for having me.
So, first and foremost, your last fight was November 2024. That was live MMA at Waterfront Place 4, a first round finish over Patty Lee. Your next fight is scheduled for 247 MMA coming up March 14th. So what was the reason that you haven't fought since November of 2024?
Just lack of opponents. It's been hard to find a matchup. We had a couple options last year that ended up not panning out for one reason or another. Maybe the one that I had scheduled for the fall, they ended up taking another fight with a different promotion. I think they're getting paid a little bit more or something like that. So I think it's just like lack of women opponents, and then it's also since there are fewer of us, it's a little bit harder to get us places. So, promoters are having to pay for flights and pay for, different things like that are a little bit more costly. Whereas if you're just looking for a 145-pound dude that wants to fight another 145-pound dude, those are plentiful in the MMA scene.
And like in a city, you can, throw a rock and find a 145-pound dude. You can call up
Yeah.
any of the gym, owners and coaches that you know. Like, dude, is there someone who wants to fight who's not even ready to fight? Like as a
Yeah.
pro, like it would be a mistake. Like, because we can fill a card with that.
Hmm.
And I mean, that's interesting, but it's not like, that's not a surprising issue for the women's featherweight division.
No.
The person I talked to earlier today, that's someone who actually competes super heavyweight, like has post college wrestling days. So like I guess that's kind of the theme for today is like weight classes where it's challenging
Hard to match.
opponent. Um, so like having not fought since November of 2024, is that something that has bothered you, or did it kind of feel in the time like, like maybe like a little bit extra time to, kind of like, get prepared, be fresh, whatever it is, like improve on some things. Like did you see it like as the time has gone on up until you getting your next matchup as like a positive, or also just like, damn, I just want to fight and I can't find anybody who will fight me?
There's definitely some of that. Some days it's a little bit easier to stay positive about it than others, but there are definitely positives to not having a set opponent because you can kind of work on your overall game. So when you're in fight camp, you're kind of just working on like, what am I going to do to fight this one person? And, you're sharpening your skills, but you're not learning a whole lot of new stuff in there because you are just kind of focused on like staying sharp and hard sparring and all that stuff. So I think in between fights is the time where you really develop as a martial artist. I get to, I feel like my grappling really improved. I got to work on some jiu-jitsu stuff that wouldn't necessarily be working on if I was just doing, focusing on MMA stuff. I feel like you can kind of play with what you want your game to become, and that's the time to do that is when you're out of camp. So I definitely would not have chosen to not fight for a year, but I do feel like I used that time wisely and did with it what I could. So
Yeah, and like it's something I've said because I had Joy Pendel on the show like not too long ago. And even being currently ranked, I think she's currently ranked like top 10 at women's featherweight, at least maybe outside of the UFC as it currently is at, because I mean, the division really doesn't exist outside of like two people if they wanted it to in the UFC. But even for someone who is ranked and the A1 Combat featherweight champion and everything, like it's very hard to get matchups. And you have to be careful because if you can get matchups in not crazy time increments, are those fights worth your time? Because there's going to be a lot of people at women's featherweight that aren't going to be competitive. And if you've already proved what you've proven, it's like why take this fight if it's not going to be a step in the right direction? And
right.
also, as you mentioned, women's featherweight and especially women's lightweight, where I believe you competed at least twice throughout your whole career. Um,
Yeah, the amateurs.
a very small community.
Mhm.
Like there's a lot of people that end up fighting, one opponent, and then a year later they end up fighting that same opponent in a different
Yeah,
promotion for that promotion's vacant featherweight title because there's not that many of you in that weight class that are of high quality.
right. Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's one of the reasons I've looked at moving down to the 135. I fought there before as well. So that's probably what we're looking to do the remainder of this year after this fight. So because I think the hope is that it will open up more doors for potential opponents that if we can get into that bantamweight class, then hopefully there's just more options.
It's I mean, it's crazy, especially like on the other end of women's weight classes, there's no past like Invicta or some of the promotions in Asia, there's no atom weight class in a major promotion either. There's a
Yeah,
pretty good percentage of women's MMA fighters that, are competing in a weight class that isn't necessarily where they're supposed to be competing. Um,
right.
even Macy Chiasson, who just fought last night, it's like, really? She's a featherweight. The
Yeah,
bantamweight is kind of crazy. Um,
yeah,
so there's a lot of people that could be competing at 105 pounds that are forced to compete at 115. And then there's
right.
people that would be a lot more comfortable at 145 or 155, and they have to get down to bantamweight. Is
Hmm.
is the cut to bantamweight at this point in your career something that you think would be comfortable enough to do if you needed to?
Yeah, so yeah, I do think that it would be would I love it? No. But yeah, it's definitely something that is doable. I need a little bit more of a heads up on those fights for sure. Probably a couple extra weeks of, dieting and, dialing it in for my macros and stuff. But it's something that's doable and it's something that would be worth it, especially with like it seems like the UFC is kind of moving away from that 145-pound weight class, which is unfortunate because there just are so many women that are bigger than 135 pounds. But it's not something that I feel like would be dangerous, which is what you see sometimes with those big cuts. I think it's something that is doable for sure.
Is yeah, I definitely advocate for more weight classes in general, like in the sport. I would love to see bridgerweight and cruiserweight. I would love to see super heavyweight make a comeback, at least in Japan, with the
Yeah.
pool of super heavyweights they have to work with. But particularly in women's MMA, the lack of atom weight and then anything higher than bantamweight has been a disservice. And even to the like more mass casual MMA fans, a lot of
Mhm.
them don't even see the need for women's bantamweight, which is like super frustrating.
Yeah.
It there's just in PFL, even though Kayla Harrison was dominating the lightweight, run at
Yeah.
PFL, and Larissa Pacheco had her success with it too. Cyborg just goes around and collects belts at 145 pounds. I think that like anything like that takes time to foster. Of course, it seems like the quality of women's 155 pounds is lower. There's less people that are doing it, and it's not around that much. There's not a sample
Right.
size. People don't even know a lot of the time that they have the option to fight at that
Mhm.
weight class.
Yeah.
So,
It's the incentive is low.
yeah, now at the very least, a benefit of being at women's featherweight or women's lightweight is if you do get a fight against a quality opponent, a lot of the time you're probably in position to be fighting for a regional promotion's vacant belt because
Yeah.
you probably are the two best women's featherweights or women's lightweight in the area.
Right.
You
Yeah.
got two of quality together, and
Mhm.
so with women's flyweight and strawweight especially, there's such a large pool of people. That's where so many of them compete. It can be a little harder to stand out. At the very least, with some of those outlier weight classes, when you get to a certain level in the echelon of people in the world at those weights, people know who you are. And now it's like,
Yeah.
all right, I would like to fight someone now who is like me or ranked higher.
Right. Yeah. Because anything that's less than that, it's like not necessarily helping you get to that next step. So,
And so, like throughout your amateur and pro career, you fought with a bunch of different promotions. You have ties to West Virginia, obviously, to Pennsylvania, and there's a lot of different regional promotions of similar quality. Like but 247, I will say, I have always liked the way that they put on their shows. I think that they seem to do good business from everybody like I've talked to that's fought with that promotion. Um, in this area of the country, because right now I'm in Newport, Kentucky.
okay.
So like I'm an hour and a half from Columbus, Ohio, I'm an hour and a half from a lot of places in West Virginia.
Mhm.
And you get some promotions that I see why people don't want to fight that often, because there's groups that don't do good business. uh,
Yeah.
so you fought with 247 as an amateur and as a pro. You were the Bayfront Brawl lightweight champion back in August of 2021. You fought with Premier MMA, and then Aries Fight Series. So you've gotten
Mhm.
a taste of a lot of the area's promotions. Um,
Yes. Several states.
So, do you notice any differences between states as time goes on? And then what do you think are the makings of a regional promotion that is set up to kind of exist long term and does good business?
Okay, so that's a great question. I think as far as differences between like state commissions and promotions, experience wise, as an amateur, you see more of a difference than you do as a pro. So I fought for Cowboy Fight Series, probably my third AMI fight, and it was in Virginia. So if I would have had that fight in Pennsylvania, I would not have been allowed head kicks. I wouldn't have been allowed ground and pound. I would have had to still wear shin guards. It's like a training wheels type of deal. It's training wheels. So when I fought in Virginia, it was basically pro rules for my third fight. So you could do elbows, you could do knees to the head, it was everything. So I think you see more of a discrepancy between like the experience you're going to have state wise as an amateur, just because the rules are going to be different and stuff. So um, I think that that's probably the biggest one. But as far as being like a promotion that's going to be able to, last throughout the years and stuff and not be able to shut down, I think not getting too greedy with, trying to like push people out and, making enemies out of people that you could use, to better your promotion in the area. Especially if you're going to be like a local promotion. I mean, it's just the market's not big enough right now to where you can really um, like afford to make enemies out of people that are around you. Like for instance, like the promotions and the matchmakers, like we kind of all got to get along in Pittsburgh and West Virginia because there's only a couple of us, and if you don't have a matchmaker, you don't have a show. So it's I feel like the ability to work together and to be upfront about your business practices and to not shy away from some of those shady things that promoters are stereotypically known to do would be the best way to be long term in an area, I guess.
The stories you hear from people who have
It's
fought
crazy.
bad promotions is like Kentucky as a state has definitely struggled to have like a premier promotion, be consistent, put on consistent events.
Mhm.
Louisville's had some fighters make it to
Yeah.
higher levels like Derby City MMA. West Virginia, I feel like I see a new promotion come out of West Virginia like every other week. And there
Yeah.
it seems like they put on a lot more boxing and everything.
A lot of boxing.
Pennsylvania, interesting spot for that state because so many good fighters out of Pennsylvania are trying to work their way up to Cage Fury. That has a
Yeah.
good hold in Pennsylvania. Um, but promotions that do bad business, it seems like there's a lot of people that maybe it's not their main job, which would make sense,
Yeah.
and they're a
Of course.
matchmaker. They help run a promotion, and it's something they on paper wanted to do, but they did not either have the commitment to put in the time to do it right, or they didn't
Mhm.
have the skill set, or like
Right.
people involved in this might also be involved with coaching and running an MMA gym. And as much as I love all of those people, they are not necessarily the people you want running the books and the business of a fight
Yes.
promotion.
Yes. Agreed.
So with this next fight, so it'll have been 12, like it would have been like 16 months since your last fight. At 247 MMA at the Venue 5, March 14th, folks. 247 has a solid stream if you want to buy the pay-per-view too. Respect the way they do their media and do some in-house stuff.
They got a good stream for sure.
That's the thing. What I liked about 247 and like a promotion like Ohio Combat League is like they just go like a little bit of the extra mile. They just do a little bit of the extra things that you don't have to do. No one's going to make you, but they make you look so much higher quality. And so those are the things they do. But this fight with Gloria DaCosta, this is going to be at featherweight. Um, she's 1-1 as a pro, and that's deceiving when you don't look at her amateur career
Yeah.
because her amateur career is, she competed in those international amateur MMA competitions. And,
Mhm.
when I'm looking at a fighter, that's always, a green flag on, is somebody going to be good competition or not. So what is your thought process going into this fight? What do you know about Gloria DaCosta? And what do you think is going to be the biggest difference between the version of you on March 14th and the version we saw most recently of you against Patty Lee?
So for the March 14th fight against Gloria, I know she comes from a good gym. She's training out of the Goat Shed down in Miami. I'm sure she's got great sparring partners, and I'm sure like I was saying recently, she's probably got some resources from coming from a big gym that we don't necessarily have coming out of a small gym in a smaller area. So I know a little bit of that about her. I've watched some of her grappling matches. She seems like a pretty solid all around fighter. But I was gonna say I think she's been off for a year if I can remember correctly. I'm not sure. I think her last fight was 2025. Um so yeah, I don't think she's fought quite yet or this year or within like the last 6 months or so. So not sure, what she's been working on, but I'm sure she's been working too. And I think the biggest difference probably between my last fight and this fight is just I've been staying in the gym, I've been consistent, and I've been adding a lot of stuff to my game that has been stuff that you can't necessarily hone in on. I've had the freedom in the past like year and a half to just experiment kind of with stuff that I think will work for myself. And um, yeah, I'm just excited to show that and see how it'll look in a fight because it's always different than it looks in sparring. It's always different in the cage than it looks even whenever you're going live with your sparring partners and your training partners. So
Now, like one thing that I really enjoy about watching your fights is the pressure that you keep, and especially when you smell blood in the water. Um, you can visibly see that you hit harder than a lot of people in your weight class, even. Um, like the pressure against the cage, what you do once you have people down on the ground and you are controlling. I mean, like the way that you pursue opponents through the cage and keep landing those big shots, like that's very entertaining stuff. Now, as like take the Maya Stewart fight, for example, in Premier MMA April 2021 for that vacant featherweight title,
Hmm.
where, as it got into championship rounds, she was tired and hurt. You got tired a little, it seemed, but your face got kind of damaged, and that was kind of how the fight ended up stopping.
Yeah.
Yeah, as time has gone on, have you ever had to like try to make a conscious effort to pull the reins on yourself, especially in like fights that might have championship rounds included, or your trademark style of aggression in your fights, is that something that it's like, no, that's my advantage, I want that to stay the same, I just want to fix other things at the same time?
Yeah, no, I that's one of those things where you can't really practice that. It's like I'm not practicing that in sparring. That's not a good way to keep sparring partners, but yeah, no, it's something that I feel like I had less control over as an amateur. Definitely not something I want to lose altogether, because I think that's the difference in a lot of people that um say they want to fight and people that really want to fight. Like once you get in there and you feel that finish. I feel like that whenever I first felt that as an amateur, it was probably around that Maya Stewart fight time. That was like unlocking a new level for me almost, because it is an important step to make if you want to be an entertaining fighter, but also if you want to be a fighter that knows how to finish. But there's a fine line between gassing yourself out, doing that, and just kind of know when to pull back. And I think specifically that fight was supposed to go the 5 rounds. I had an old coach who is not one of my coaches anymore, but he threw in the towel, and remember my eye got all beat up from that time. But I think that I would have won that fight if I had gone the rest of the distance, but because we were both a little bit tired. But that was supposed to be a 5 round fight, and I think that was a big learning experience for me, because it was the first time I ever really like put the gas on and didn't really take it off, and it definitely showed in that fourth round, I think. But I don't necessarily think that it's something that I would change about myself. I think that it's just something I've learned how to better manage.
Because I think like a lot of people's reactions would be to say like, oh, you don't want to like do that and gas yourself out. But at the same, for so many other fighters that you watch, you're begging for them to do that. Like at certain times, like like you
Yeah.
cannot always win like in the day over the course of the distance of a fight. Like, and
Mhm.
sometimes it's some judges are terrible at their jobs, or
Yes.
at least in for 3/5 or 3/12 of the night, they're horrible at their jobs. You
Yeah.
don't know how fights are going to get scored, especially on the regional scene. Being able to get the finish is huge. Now, in watching the Maya Stewart fight, I I think that pretty much everybody watching it on video in person was surprised when it was like, "What's going on?" The ref
Yeah.
waved
Including me.
pointed to the towel on the ground. The commentators on the video were like, "Why'd they throw the towel?" And it was
Yeah.
like it was confusing. Um, I I do think there's a very good chance you would have won that fight had it gone the rest of the way. You were still landing the hardest shots in that fight. She smiles the whole time, so it maybe
Yeah.
the damage is lesser apparent, but
I like to fight, so she's gonna smile anyway. Yeah, I got a lot of respect for her.
both of you put on a great performance, and that's a fight that, in hindsight, like now at bantamweight, she's 3-0 in Fury FC. She's 1-0 in Cage Fury with a win over a 3-0 Rebecca
Nice.
Edmonds. Like that's a Maya Stewart. In hindsight, that's a high quality opponent that you went to championship rounds with, and probably
I
like
know.
very well could have beaten.
Oh, it's okay. We might be able to run it back one
I
day.
I mean, especially if you make your way down to bantamweight, I
Yeah.
think there's actually like a very good chance that like that could end up happening. Like in the Cage Fury or the Fury FC scene. For sure,
Mhm.
there's a high chance that could happen.
Oh yeah, for sure. But yeah, that was a good one for sure. Actually, I was gonna say something about whenever you were talking about Kentucky promotions. They treated us good at Premier down there. They gave us like little bags, and gave us some little favors for fighting, and I felt like that was one of the promotions that treated me the best as a fighter. I really like those guys.
I've heard some good things about Premier.
I don't
HR
know if they're still around, but
that's the problem is that like some
right.
of them don't for real know. Like HRMMA I thought was gone for a bit and now it seems that they're there again. Ohio Combat League has done such a good job over the last couple of years of getting the foothold in this area. They put on a lot of
Okay.
events in Newport, Kentucky too.
Okay.
So I think that's where a lot of people look to fight if they can. Um, but yeah, like glad to hear that Kentucky did
They
right
did
by
me
the
right, you know?
situation they could. And the other thing about Maya Stewart, for God's sake, she's her next fight. She's coming off a win over Katharina Lehner, and her next fight is in Fusion Fight League against Pani Kianzad. So, like, it took a few wins in a promotion like that, and look at the opponent she's fighting next. This is how these weight classes work.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, so otherwise, you know, you've got the fight coming up. Again, folks, look out for 247 MMA on March 14th at the venue 5. I assume venue 5 is the actual venue that it'll be called, uh, that it'll be at. Live MMA at Waterfront Place 4. When people name their events like this, it does get a little confusing.
Yeah, so the arena, it's Sunny Days Arena. So
Okay.
I think that's their fifth show there. I think
Okay.
that's why it's the number five.
And so it's a very exciting matchup with Gloria DaCosta. Looking forward to that. To close out this conversation, um, we've been able to talk a little bit about women's featherweight, women's lightweight, the whole weight class and regional, promotion MMA world that is out there. If there is one thing that you expect to be different about MMA within the next 5 to 10 years that you think really should be different over the next 5 to 10 years, what do you think those things are?
Overall or women's?
Both, both, because I
Okay.
think those are going to be distinct. I would imagine.
Yeah, I think so. So for specifically for women's MMA, even just so had my first fight in 2018, and over the past 8 years that I've been doing this, more and more women are getting involved, and more women are getting involved young. So I think that like starting training like I did whenever I was like 24 years old, 23 or 4 years old, and being able to expect to compete at the highest levels, I think that's going to be real tough in the next few years, especially with the girls wrestling taking over like it is. Especially, I mean, I'm not sure if that's everywhere, but in this area, in Pennsylvania, I know West Virginia, I think they're going to be sanctioned next year for school. And the girls are going to get started younger and younger in that. I think the best bases for MMA are boxing and wrestling if you are going to have a base as a kid, and I think that that is going to increase the talent pool drastically. So I think that we're going to start seeing, girls coming out of like young 20s, and those are the girls that you're going to have to watch out for because they've been wrestling since they were, how 10 years old now. So I think that's going to be a great asset to the sport. I live in a very wrestling heavy area, so I get to see firsthand. I actually was part of the coaching staff for the local high school here for their very first year of female wrestling, which
Oh,
was
that's
really,
awesome.
yeah, it was cool. I think that that'll be cool to see, and cool to see how that impacts the sport over and for women, and for MMA overall. I don't know. I think that we'll start seeing I think we'll start seeing less American champions and more champions from other countries just because of the pay scale. I think it's hard to make a living wage fighting professionally here, even at the highest levels sometimes. I think people are getting signed at the UFC like 10 and 10 or something. So it's just hard to make a living on that here. And it's even with sponsorships and stuff, it's as far as like rent and stuff going up like that. I think that I hate to say it, but I think that like there will be less American champions in the next 10 years unless something changes.
That's the thing is
It's unfortunate.
on both of your points, like to the overall thing. something is gonna have to give.
Hmm.
It's inevitable.
Or
Either
not, and it'll change. Yeah.
either the sport will irreparably suffer for a period of time because of this,
Hmm.
or it's not 2005 anymore, and this stuff
Right.
isn't on Spike TV anymore. These dudes aren't like, not every MMA fighter anymore is like a lost soul that found meaning in fighting, like meaning in
Right.
life through fighting. These are like there's a lot of athletes, people who have
They're
just
athletes.
involved in combat sports. It's not the
Yep.
same as it was, and the money is gonna have to change. I
Hmm.
don't tend to, concern myself too much with how anybody besides myself what kind of money they're making. At the
Yeah.
same time, I am realistic enough to know that unless you start paying people more in the UFC, they're not going to keep fighting in the
Yeah.
UFC. They just won't. 10 and 10 would be fine if you knew that you were going to get that 4 times a year,
4 or 5. Yeah. Right.
25 years
Guaranteed.
of your life. But
Hmm.
this is a weird sport where you can achieve your dream of getting to the UFC and it can be over in a few months. And you're trying to figure out the harder part, how to get back.
And
Uh,
specifically for women, it's like we're fighting 1 time a year on that. Like, yeah. So,
and, for women's combat sports, there are so many avenues of making more money that don't necessarily have anything to do with being a good MMA fighter. Like
yeah.
there's 1,000 different what influencer boxing, power
Yeah.
slap, OnlyFans stuff
I
that
got
people
power
are
slap.
involved in.
Yeah.
They come up with new promotions every day and new ways to do combat sports, which is
Yeah.
awesome. But it's just a weird, like, just for how, like, for Sean O'Malley, why defend, why try to spend 4 years trying to get back to the UFC bantamweight title? If you could make a boxing match with like Ryan Garcia happen
Right.
your
Yeah.
whole life, that is generational wealth. Uh,
Yeah.
so it's a very weird spot, and especially now that Zuffa Boxing is up and running, and
Mhm.
immediately all the fighters like Jai Advertise getting paid what to like
Yeah.
fight that one time.
Mhm.
Um, Now
And you
to
do see a lot of people go to power slap. Like a lot of people that I know personally that I've trained with, like cross trained with in the past, the women go to power slap. It's crazy.
or bare knuckle, like
Yeah.
places where you have a little bit more freedom of how you promote yourself. There's
Yeah.
less restrictions, sort of like on how you promote yourself.
Mhm.
People, a lot of women in those promotions, they're sponsored by like even lingerie brands. They wear that at the weigh-ins and stuff. Like there's
Yeah.
there's all these like outside money-making things
Right.
that are a weird new part of this era of MMA. To the
Yep.
women's MMA point, I don't think you will, as much as I love people like Angela Hill, I
Hmm.
don't think that there will be people with the story of Angela Hill in 5 to 10 years in women's MMA.
Yeah.
The reason that people like Ronda Rousey dominated in their period of time was because if you've been doing judo since you were 5 years old and you're one of the best in the world at it, it's a
Hmm.
lot different than someone that started training at 16 and, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um, and women's MMA is one of the few women's professional sports that is exactly the same as the men's version in the rules and how they do it. Many sports have different rules, which is insane. Boxing even has the different rounds and time.
Round time. Hmm.
Absolutely insane.
It is.
Who was it recently that it was Amanda Serrano or Katie Taylor? It was someone on one of those Netflix shows where they fought like 12 rounds. And they were making this huge deal about it, like, oh my God, like, amazing that she's going the 12 rounds. She said she wants to prove she can go the 12 rounds. Like, dude, no shit, she can go the 12 rounds. She's one of the best boxers in the world. I would
Yeah.
imagine so. Why are we actually like
Yeah.
what
I don't think
year?
she's questioning that. Yeah.
God's sake, why are we acting like this person who's done nothing but box all day, every day, trying to perfect this? Yeah, I'm quite sure that they can go another 2 rounds. So,
Right.
public perception, unfortunately, with MMA, when it comes to mass fan and combat sports overall, it is still lagging behind where a lot of us would think it would be to this point.
Yes. Yeah. I agree. But at the same time, it's come leaps and bounds. It's a young sport, right? So I mean, it's come leaps and bounds in the small time that we've had it. So hopefully it just continues to grow and it continues to progress and be better and better for the fighters. And so that's my hope.
And
But
that's what's amazing about a young sport, where women's MMA has only been at the forefront liberally for like 20 years, like however
yeah,
long ago,
right.
Gina Carano and Julie Kedzie like had those like landmark fights,
Yes.
and
Yep.
Strike Force and
Really Kedzie.
Elite XC were willing to put on those fights and took a chance, and they found a niche with it and they found success with it. And Dana White once said women would never be in the UFC, and someone came
Did.
along and they changed his mind. That tends to be how that works.
Yep.
So for a sport that's only been around professionally for like a little over 30 years, and for women's MMA, which has existed for like about half that time, really,
Yeah.
this is a sport that grows at an exponentially faster rate than the rest of pro sports because it's new, and it's new in an era where everything moves faster.
Yes, that's true. So hopefully it just continues to grow and we keep seeing it do better and better every year. But I'm excited to see where specifically women's MMA goes after the wrestling impacts it. I'm pumped about that.
And I hope Invicta FC is still around for it too.
Me
That's been
too.
it's been a very important promotion, like along the years. I love every event that they put on.
Mhm.
Uh, so otherwise, Cheyenne, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for being here today on a day that I know was busy for you.
Thank
So glad we were able to make this happen. The best of luck and health to you leading up to your fight on March 14th. Again, folks, that's at 247 MMA at the Venue 5. If you can't check it out live, order the stream if you're going to be at home on a Saturday night. And Cheyenne, if there's anything else that you want to say, anybody you want to shout out, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I guess I just want to thank my coaches. Want to thank the Mat Factory and Isaac and all those guys over there. Want to thank my sponsors. Some of my sponsors are Relaxed State, Imposed Will. I've got Go Green Windows if you need windows done. Who else do I have sponsors? Living Young with Paul, Kendra's Tattoos. Yeah, just all my sponsors that helped me out for this fight, and all my fans that are coming out with me. And um, adopt, don't shop.
And folks, follow her on Instagram at Bat Queen Shy, not Shay. This has been Cheyenne Bat Queen Hall. Thank you so much for being here, folks. Thank you so much for listening. Have yourselves a great week and peace.